Hello, everyone, and welcome to Loop Up Live. My name is Lee Henderson, and today we're going to be talking about, if you're considering Teams calling and deploying Teams calling to your business, we've had a lot of experience with it. We've done a lot of deployments of Teams calling, and we thought it might be great to give a bit of an expert-informed view of some of the top project pitfalls that you can face during a deployment of Teams Voice. um, uh, Generally in a global scenario, but the guidance is the same either way. And today I'm joined by my two guests. You'll all probably remember from last time, Zach Bennett. Hello, Zach. If you'd like to
Hey,
introduce yourself a little bit.
sure, yeah. I'm Zach Bennett. I'm one of the solutions architects at LoopUp, primarily helping customers migrate from their existing PBX, whether that be Teams, whether that be an aging legacy PBX, to Microsoft Teams and on the LoopUp Cloud Telephony platform.
Excellent. Thank you. And joining us today for the first time is Michael Bodgia. Michael, good morning. Good evening. Good afternoon.
Good morning, evening, and afternoon to you too. Yeah, really excited for this. I'm head of our US sales team. I've been at LoopUp for almost 11 years now, and I've probably had thousands, if not tens of thousands, of calls about cloud telephony and Teams calling. So, hope to offer some insight on how to avoid these pitfalls.
Excellent. Welcome aboard to the both of you, and welcome everyone at home. So I thought when we're talking about Teams deployments, I thought it might be really valuable if we start to break down the deployment into a couple of different phases where we can look at sort of where we're going to run into problems or potentially going to run into problems at each of those different points. And I mean, the first port of call when it comes to looking at a deployment of Teams is, well, looking at a deployment of Teams, like the pre-deployment phase. I mean, for me, that's walking in and saying, right, well, we've decided that we're interested in looking at Microsoft Teams calling. Maybe you've organized to do a proof of concept, which was the subject of our last webinar. And you've decided that this is really the way that you wish to go for your business. So, I mean, at that point, what do you think, Michael? Like, what's the one thing that you think is probably the biggest trap that people could fall into at that sort of phase of deciding that they want to go, but not quite,
Yeah.
haven't pulled the trigger yet?
Yeah, well, it's sort of the critical stage, and I think where most of my conversations begin with companies is really early in the buying process, where this decision needs to be made. And I think that there are many pitfalls at this stage. I think a constant theme is that people are definitely keen on Teams calling. They want to bring telephony capabilities into Teams. That's a bit of a given now. I think one of the things I see quite a lot is the temptation to do that with existing vendors or existing carriers. If you're a company that has offices in 5 international locations, the temptation is to engage with the 5 carriers you have in those locations and have them sort of plug into Teams. And I
Mm.
think that won't always be the wrong decision, of course, but I think you are kind of missing some benefits by going that route. Firstly, there's no rationalization of vendors. A big promise in this space now is to have fewer vendors for telephony, so you sort of miss out on that. And the bigger thing that I think is missing with that strategy is the sort of second layer. This isn't really about just plugging into Teams as a telco. This is about connecting to Teams as a Microsoft expert, as a modern workplace
Mm.
expert. Moving from old school telephony to next gen telephony. So I think not shopping around, not really understanding who the movers and shakers are in the space, is one thing, and it's natural, right? I know we'll probably talk about porting at some point. There isn't a need to port if you do that. There isn't a need to form
Yeah.
relationships. So I get it, but I think it's, for me, it's a big initial pitfall to avoid.
I mean, it is attractive because it does seem like the path of least resistance. Okay, well, we
Exactly.
already have this established relationship. We already have a contract. We can just sort of roll on and keep everything status quo.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would argue that if you're looking at consolidating to a single unified telephone system, a global telephone system, that is Microsoft Teams, and that might be replacing, Cisco in Europe and Mitel in
Yeah.
North America, and you might have all sorts of crazy different systems all over the globe. But you're wiping all of that away and replacing it with a single platform. It seems logical to look at replacing discrete regional telcos with as fewer teams managed service providers as possible to really reduce the footprint on, well, not just your team to manage those people, but also from a billing point of view, from a company that can with more knowledge of your business, they can have more knowledge of what your requirements are and tailor their solution more to what you need rather than these siloed geographical approaches.
I
um
think one key thing in there as well is if you are consolidating those carriers and you're looking for one of those providers, there's also that time to consolidate that telephony management as well. There's been many times I'm talking to global customers, and maybe we start off talking around one location.
mhm.
Let's talk about London, and then we go, okay, what numbers do you have in London? Uh, okay, so now I have to speak to these people, and they'll send me an Excel spreadsheet that's got some of the numbers. But then actually, we use two providers in London, so I need to go to someone else just to get a
Yes.
list of your own numbers. So having that kind of one stop place, that one, whether that be a management pool or a dedicated account manager that you can go to and say, I want to know about London, or actually I also want to know about Singapore. And having
Yeah.
that one point of contact to go to and get that information, I think is really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and then there's also another, just tying into that number situation with different numbers and different things. One other thing to note is that if you're sticking with your status quo sort of situation, you're still going to be facing that problem. When migrating to a more consolidated solution, then you can look at bringing that together because a lot of providers, and LoopUp is a prime example of this, will have an overarching control panel that can manage your number ranges globally once they've been ported into the platform. So that really does add that extra layer of, okay, well, we don't need to call Joe in, Joe in Dorset because he knows what the number ranges are, and it keeps it a little bit cleaner and simpler ongoing, and reduces those individuals that hold all of the knowledge. That's not a good way to put it. It reduces the it helps to spread the knowledge out. That's a better way to put it.
Yeah, and it becomes, once you found that provider, you've also got that, that potentially like single pane of glass, or that one
Hmm.
stop place to come to and find, information at a global level, or if you want to go directly and scope that down to one particular site as well, you can do that very fast.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's sort of unifying on the front end and the back end. You've got everything on Teams. You have to get your house in order on the back end too. And not to get into pricing too much, but economies of scale is huge in this too. If you are a big global company, so many big global companies are not getting telco economies of scale because they
No.
are medium-sized domestic customers as far as the vendor's concerned. See that
Yeah.
time and time again where you're sort of analyzing price and ROI, and it's unbelievable some of the agreements that are in place through force or necessity. So you are really looking at single global vendor for telco and a global telco agreement. So it definitely has cost implications too.
Absolutely. And uniformity of approach. I mean, I've seen a number of times in the past where one carrier will provide a solution which is simply just trunks into Teams, and you're expected to manage everything yourself.
Yeah.
Another one might be, well, we'll provide trunks, but you need to get SBCs that plug into Teams, and you can manage the SBCs, so then you need that knowledge as well. Whereas, choosing a single vendor means that you can say, all right, well, this is the level of support that we know we're going to get. And this is what it says on the tin, and we know that's what we're going to receive. So I think that's a very valuable thing to consider and factor into your search for a team's calling partner.
Yeah, I think just a final point on that one. I think because I think that's so valuable to say. I think with the pandemic and the massive rise in
Mm,
Teams usage, we saw a massive influx of teams calling vendors. Everyone that's even sort of grazed telephony or grazed Microsoft licenses has sort of cobbled together a solution in this space. So you do have a massive range of experience, some who just plug in and away you go, through to vendors like LoopUp, who've been a Microsoft Voice partner since 2010, really been around the block on this. So when shopping around, look for things like advanced specialization awards, look for gold partnership across several designations. Those are the sort of entry level filters that you should be using when trying to choose a vendor.
I think there's one other thing so far as like the the things to look for, and one of the things that you should really bear in mind is that managed service provider that you're looking to work with, are they certified as a carrier in the countries that you need to work in?
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty that, as you say, there are plenty that have popped up that may or may not be a registered carrier, and while they can host your numbers, is that going to is that going to be a possibility forever, or is there going to be a change to the regulation and they're going to have their ticket pulled, so to speak? So yeah, have a look at how many countries that carrier is able to support, and really look at what your footprint is, not just now but into the future, and whether or not that's going to cover you off and see you. And I think so, flowing on from there and making that selection and building that initial relationship with the partner, I think that then leads into the next phase, which is really working with that partner to tailor and design a solution that is, going to be suitable for your particular business. And I think, part of that is going to be working with their Microsoft experts who are going to know Teams back to front and know what's going on in that world. And I mean, Zach, that's your entire role here at LoopUp. So, I'm wondering, like, as that specialist, what's one of the biggest things that you see once we've decided, yes, we're going ahead? What's one of the biggest sort of traps that you might see from that planning and getting ready to go phase?
Yeah, well, I can speak to maybe something around, say, like the team's configuration. Um,
Mhm,
um, there's a breadth of customers that I've spoke to, and because Teams has been around for quite a while now, and
mhm,
it's getting quite mature in the kind of phone system that it is. Um, there is kind of some camps of users that you'll find where, sorry, or customers that you'll find where they'll either have that in-house expertise already, and it's just a case of supporting, those people being there. If it is, let's spend an hour talking around number presentation, caller ID. What can you do inside of Teams?
sure.
Um, or there's the complete other end of that spectrum as well, where you have users that come and go, I want to go to Teams. I know I want to go to Teams. Maybe it's someone up high has told me we're going to Teams. I'm a Cisco guy, I'm a generic PBX guy. I need help, and
Mhm,
it's
mhm,
making sure that you completely understand in that conversation where you lie, and also where you want to lie as well. Me as a solutions architect, I'll come in and I can, like I said, be very hands off, and let's just point you in the right direction if that's what you need, or we can really step by step walk you through configuration of users, configuration of your tenant. It's kind of that whole adage of you can teach someone to fish, or just kind of taking it that way with the team's configuration.
absolutely. And look, I think Teams configuration is something that's a little overlooked. I mean, it's many customers are already managing Teams. They're managing, the teams themselves, and the messaging policies and the sharing policies and all of that good stuff, the modern workplace component. But then the voice component is a whole nother separate thing. I mean, it really is a completely separate system so far as how it's configured. I mean, it's in the same PowerShell environment, it's in the same TAC,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of different concepts to sort of wrap your head around. And thankfully, there's a lot of you know a lot of things that are similar. There's a lot of policy similarities to how things are managed elsewhere, but they're around different concepts. So if you're a non-voice person, that can be tricky. If you are a voice person, then you're learning a whole new platform because you might not be playing with Teams already. I'd add to that too that, dipping back to what we were talking about a moment ago, that if you're working with multiple carriers, then there's going to be multiple configuration points, right? Because you might have one carrier in the UK and they've put all of their calling OVRPs in. They've set up all of their policies. They've set everything up the way that they think it should be done.
Yeah.
And then you might have another carrier come on board in the US and they're like, well, no, actually, we think that the calling policy should be this way, or it should be something, completely different. So I think there's a bit of a risk there to make sure that if you are dealing with multiple carriers, then it does need to be that communication between them and an agreement, because it is a common platform that you're configuring together. You can't really split. Well, if you wanted to go to a different tenancy for the UK versus US, then that's fine. But that seems like a very big, crazy way to do things.
Big pitfall.
It is a huge pitfall. It's definitely something to think about.
I think one of the
Um,
things I've, especially because we move customers that are coming from teams as well. We've moved customers that are coming from other direct routing as a service providers,
mm,
and there's a portion of my time now that's kind of, instead of doing design workshops, I'm actually doing, let's do Teams admin center reviews. And we're looking. We've got customers that have moved because they've had a terrible experience. With their old provider. It's taken them, you know, too much time to actually, move across or actually get that initial thing configured. Uh, so a lot of my time now has been spent, well, let's just see, we all know there's usually the right way, and then there's the Microsoft way, and then there's 10 other different ways that this stuff can be configured. So it's kind of
mhm,
figuring out where in there that that configuration lies, and how we can rectify or change that as well for customers.
mm. And potentially tuning things like making sure that all the subnets are mapped into the core quality dashboard, for example, so that you can track your quality correctly, which may not have been done in the first instance.
Exactly. A particular thing I found was, setting up call queues for users.
Mm,
Instead of adding groups or teams into call queues, it was individual users. So when I
yeah,
came in to do a review, the conversation went, "Do you realize you've got a lot of queues that are actually blank?" "Oh, we had no idea." "Oh yeah, that person left 3 months ago." And that kind of upkeep, that managed service around making sure that it's configured in the right way to automatically, as soon as you add a user to a group, they're in a queue. None of this
yeah.
particular user level configuration
Well,
change.
and it's the attraction of that is that it seems very logical to just go, oh, I'll just put these users in, because that's what you had to do in a PBX, right?
Yeah.
That was the old way of doing it, where you'd manually enter the extension numbers
Mhm.
and then you would manually manage those numbers. But when it's something as dynamic and especially as global as a team solution, the more automation, the more accurately, the more user administration that can happen seamlessly in the background without the users doing it. And by pointing a call queue at a team, that is the most simplistic way of doing it, because the team's already being managed by the users. Let's let the calls flow to the team. It's yeah, a really, really great way to do it. Um, Thinking about, during that planning phase, one of the things that's come to me a couple of times is people that customers that definitely um, have walked into the sort of situation where they've got this existing fleet of physical telephones. They could be Cisco, Mitel, whatever the case may be, and they've got to really sort of step in and make a decision. All right, well, what devices like? And a lot of customers have asked me, well, can I bring my old phones with me? To which the answer is probably not, but maybe kind of. But I mean, what's your take on the whole phone situation, Zach? Zach?
So especially with phones, I'm seeing a massive shift of
Mm,
people don't want handsets on desks anymore. you know Headsets, you two are both wearing poly headsets there. um the, this device that I can wear on my head, and then, oh, if I walk over to go get a drink and my phone rings, I can also answer it on my phone and still use the same
exactly.
headset. you know
Exactly.
um and this whole kind of having your DDI follow you as well. It really helps with this. It's on your mobile, it's on your your soft phone device. It's actually
Mhm.
inside, the Teams client. Um, so they kind of slowly seeing handsets go away. There always will be a need for them, and there's always be that one group of users that will, I have to have a handset on my desk, or I feel like I've not got a number, or plenty of different questions.
I kind of feel like, and this might be a little bit cheeky, but I kind of feel like a physical telephone in 2022 is kind of like the equivalent of a physical inbox that people put letters into on your desk. It's kind of, you don't have a physical inbox anymore. Your email comes to your laptop, it comes to your phone, it comes to a browser window wherever you are in the world. You just log in and view it. So it seems logical that you would do the same thing with your telephone number. And the most logical way to use a PC or mobile is with, a Bluetooth device. In this case, I mean, these ones have a dongle that connects to your PC and then Bluetooth for the device itself. So it really does provide you with that simplistic way of taking your number with you. And let's face it, 99% of people out there are going to be using their mobile phone as their primary compute device most of the time. Like most business people that I know check their email on their phone. It's their primary sort of, just get through stuff whilst we're on the move. And it seems logical that that phone that's in your pocket becomes your new phone because, well, you're already used to it. It's just a matter of a different app. In this case, Teams, which you've probably already got, hopefully already got loaded. I think
One thing that
the other, sorry, go ahead.
one thing with that as well, when you talk about handsets, is lead times. Especially if you are planning. Um, we probably everybody that's watching this has been touched by the chip shortage, whether that be trying to buy yourself a car or
Hmm.
or something. And there's been some massive lead times on handsets from particular vendors, and I've seen customers actually ditch the handset because of that. Oh, I
Yeah.
can get headsets in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I have to wait
yeah,
4 months for these 300 phones. We're going with headsets, and that's kind of made that push to move to the headsets. So if you are stuck to having handsets on the desk, one major pitfall is think about what you want, what features you want early on. Get those ordered, um, get those decisions made around handsets.
absolutely. Speaking of lead times, I think one of the other things to really keep in mind is how long it's going to take you to port numbers from your existing carrier to a new carrier, because it really does. And if you speak to your carrier, they'll let you know roughly what it is in your neck of the woods. I mean, here in Australia, I know that depending on the carrier, with Optus, it's going to be sort of 4 weeks thereabouts. With Telstra, it can be a little bit longer. In the US, it's quite simple and very slick. In the UK, the same. And then, I can tell you some of the experiences I've had in down here in Southeast Asia, in Singapore and Hong Kong, where things are a little bit more elastic depending on where you are. So I think leaning on your provider and saying, look, okay, well, we need to build this into our timeline. What is the estimated time to get these numbers across, if indeed it's possible to port at all? But yeah, your carrier is going to know exactly what you're going to be facing there, and can then give you that indication so that you can not have that as a shock, especially if you're looking at doing the migration as part of and I've seen it a couple of times where a customer has been planning a migration as part of a physical site relocation, where they're moving to a different location where it might be a hot desk environment. They're going to have staff working in a hybrid manner, so it's maybe 3 days in a hot seat environment in their office. That time to port those numbers hasn't been taken into account before the physical move, and that can be a bit of a shock. So it is definitely something to bear in mind before proceeding.
One thing as well around porting, I've found, when you are architecting a solution, or looking at migration waves or paths for a truly global customer, you often find that those number porting time ranges will push you down. Okay, these guys are wave one,
Mm,
because we could port in this time frame, or um, these are going to have to move back because we know there's actually quite a long lead time on porting, in those locations. Um, so I think it's quite important to make sure that you've got a provider, or your kind of provider that you're using to help you move to teams, that they are able to, quite slick, and be able to, okay, well, we need to move up our configuration. There's a lot of times that, especially I find in my projects, we're waiting for porting, and I wish it's something that we can speed up, but it's, teams configurations done, people are pre-configured, all we're waiting for is that port date. We've already
Well,
done our design workshops.
I think the beauty of that is, especially when you're dealing on a very large scale, like a multinational or a global scale, is that when you book all of those ports in, if you know that you're going ahead, if you book them all in, then you can get all your timelines, pre-program and preset everything and get it ready to go. And you can have a lot of work going in parallel. Like, these aren't the days of your traditional waterfall based project where, okay, we've got to assemble the chassis and we've got to do the block cabling and get the test point frame set up and running. And like, I'm sounding very old right now because this is my heritage. Like, I'm an old school PBX guy. But that physical, we need these blocks of time, really starts to overlap when you're working on a global scale and when you're working on a global platform with a global partner. It's really fun to see.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning as well about vendor selection. If you are in those 5 countries and you do have 5 carriers you're working with, how do you coordinate all of
Ugh.
those? If you have a single, there are still going to be 5 ports, but if you have a single partner to coordinate those ports, it's going to be a lot smoother. And again, vendor selection, you know, does the vendor that you're going with have a number management team, a dedicated group of people whose day job is coordinating number ports? How experienced is this vendor? Have they been doing Teams calling for a long time? Do they have underlying relationships with carriers, even losing carriers? Because if you choose a vendor that has that clout and has those relationships, that you can develop a little bit of flexibility and elasticity in there, and get things done much more quickly. So it is a big source of fear, I think, number porting when having those initial conversations. But if you choose the right vendor and they create a good plan for you, you can make it much more smooth than it otherwise could be.
I'll tack onto that and say that selecting that vendor that has the right, the right skills and the right support for you leading up to the project and during the project, you should also consider that as your post-project support, because
Yeah.
getting that support once you pull the trigger and you go live, having that team there to manage, you know, to manage your day-to-day moves, adds, and changes, or to advise us to new features as they come to market, as well as helping you to chase down any issues that you may have. I mean, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that you're going to deploy teams, and you may have a call or two that'll be, not of the highest quality. I mean, that's like Zach and I were saying earlier on, making sure that Teams is configured correctly, so you can say, all right, we had a poor quality call. Let's look at the call quality dashboard. Let's look at the metrics of that call. And we can drill down and say, all right, well, this is where that person was. This is the specific site and subnet they were connected to.
Yeah.
Were they using Wi-Fi? Were they using a supported device? Was their machine, performing correctly? I think that's definitely something to factor in. Would you say, Zach?
Yeah, for sure. I think post deployment is definitely something that everyone should think of. Um, uh, y- if you're moving to Teams, hopefully you're moving to Teams as a long term solution. So make sure that your support team is also um, you know there along with you, and able to provide all the kind of levels of support you need around the globe. That's one key thing.
Yeah, it's critical. I think we're going from a world where telephony support is kind of famously bad. If I have an issue with my cell phone, I'm not calling my carrier. I'm just waiting for it to sort itself out. This is telephony as a service, next gen telephony, where the vendor should have much more of a software-like relationship with their customers. Responsive 24/7 support, account management that does the job. These are critical things to decide on when choosing a vendor.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've run a little bit over, so we might do a little bit of wrap up now. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them below, and we will be answering. Well, I should have said this right at the start as well, but hopefully people have been asking questions, and we'll be answering those questions shortly if we haven't already. But I think the key points that we need to look at here are, when you're walking into a project, comprehensively look at the vendors that you're working with and make sure that everything aligns with your needs and ambitions for your overall global deployment, or even your national deployment. It really doesn't matter. Just look at who you're working with and try and pick your vendors very carefully. Two, make sure that your devices have been mapped out and planned so that they suit the use cases that you're going to be facing. Make sure that the configuration is going to be planned at a global level, at a full tenant level, as opposed to individual components. And make sure that your number porting is thought through so that you don't get stung with any timeline issues, both there and with the devices. And finally, look beyond the deployment itself. It's generally going to be a couple of years that you're going to be walking into a Microsoft Teams deployment. So make sure that you're partnering with someone that is going to provide you with the support that you need going forward. But on that note, I'll wrap it up there. If there's any questions that you have of our team, please do feel free to reach out. We're always happy to give any advice on migrating to Teams and helping you to make the decision to move forwards and find the best way. But Michael and Zach, thank you very much for your time. And thank you everyone out there. We'll see you on the next Loop Up Live.
Bye all.
Thanks.